Welcome back to Untaming Masculinity, the podcast where we tackle issues relevant to men and their journeys to reclaim their masculinity. I'm Dan, and as always, I am joined by my good friend Brad. What is going on today?
I'm freezing, man. It is cold here. It is supposed to get down to single digits tonight. I'm sitting in my basement right now, and I'm freezing. I'm real cold. What about you, man?
It's funny. It's we were talking a little bit before we hit record. We're getting the same thing. We must be getting a couple of days after you, but this weekend we've been hitting like days in the 40s and 50s. We've set records here in New York City area for, most time between measured snowfalls, latest recorded snowfall, all that good stuff. We've gotten nothing this year. And Saturday night, it's supposed to get down to below zero with like a wind chill of like -10 or -12. So that's going to be fun. And then by the next Tuesday, it's supposed to be back into the 50s. So.
Still with no precipitation?
With still no precipitation, which is, listen, I live on a sandbar. You can barely sled here. So I don't care if it snows here. I just want to make sure it snows up in the mountains so I can go snowboarding.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we've gotten dumped on, not necessarily the valley so much, but in the mountains, we've gotten astronomical amounts of snow this year.
Yeah. I will say I do like at least one good snowstorm a year. I'm good for one. It's nice to look at. It's fun to get out there and fire up the snowblower and
sucks driving.
All that good stuff.
Commuting in a snowstorm is the pits.
See, I got a pickup truck, so it's
here's the thing.
I'm the guys that's just blazing along.
I don't mind driving in it. I just don't like the people that drive around me.
Yeah.
That's the concern, is people drive like idiots. We have a lot of California transplants here. They see snow, they don't know what to do. They just slide all over the road. It's ridiculous.
We get a lot of that too. But as far as topic today, I wanted to dive into something that's been on my mind a little bit lately, and I think with some of the conversations you and I have had offline, it's probably been on yours as well. But it's the it surrounds itself with integrity in the idea of showing up regardless of the situation and performing to your best ability, regardless of where your mind's at, what's going on. I guess I can fill it in a little bit without getting into too much detail. The reason why it's been kind of on my mind lately is I've got some stuff going on in life, and showing up at work has been difficult in the sense of not physically showing up, but mentally showing up. It's been difficult because my mind is elsewhere. But the other day I was kind of sitting there doing some work, and I realized regardless of what's going on in my head and in my life, I'm getting paid to be here to do a certain job, and I owe it to the people that are paying me to do that job to show up best ability regardless of what's going on. As a side effect to that, also not bring quote unquote life into work. I was wondering if you'd had similar situations and what your kind of thought process is on that.
Man, this topic drive has kind of driven my thought process the last few days. This goes beyond work for me, and I think for a lot of guys, because how often is it that there's a day or a week where you just don't have it, or you're stressed out, or you had a really bad fight with your wife and you feel pretty bad? Guys go through that stuff all the time. You're going through it at work. I'm kind of going through it on the personal front, where I had to hear some very hard conversations recently about myself and some of the ways in which I was showing up. And it really made me take a second to evaluate myself and ask, am I who I pretend to be? Am I who I say that I am? And in all of those moments, one, they're incredibly difficult. Right? It can be mentally taxing because it's really easy to beat yourself up. It's really easy to feel that, I don't have it today. I suck. I'm not going to put forth any effort. I'm just going to sit on my couch, or I'm just going to veg out on my computer at work and binge eat and feel sorry for myself. We all want to do those things. But the question you have to ask yourself is, do those things serve you in any way? And I would venture that the answer is a resounding no.
There's two things there. The one is, does it serve you in any particular way? And you're correct. The answer is no. What value is provided by just having a pity party and mailing it in? The second part is, do you have a responsibility to other people that are involved, be it employers, family members, whoever, to, regardless of what's going on between your ears, show up to your best ability and perform to your best ability? And my argument is absolutely.
Yeah.
If somebody's paying you to do a job, they're paying you to get your best work, not for you just to put in minimum effort. Yeah. And on the flip side with like family and stuff, your responsibility as a man is to be present and to perform your duties as a husband and a father and a family member. And we're not saying to disregard what you're feeling, but you have to be able to sometimes compartmentalize that and put it to the side so that you can perform your duties.
That's really well put. I mean, ultimately, if you're having a bad day, does your employer truly care? Yeah, at some surface level, they want to make sure you're doing well, but you still have to perform, right? Like there are certain elements of your job where your company's reliant on you. Let's just say you run your own business. You can't simply say, "Oh, I don't have it today. I'm not going to go out there and hustle," because you're going to directly impact your bottom line, right? You think of at home with a family. You're having a bad day. You're feeling sorry for yourself. Your kids still need to eat dinner. Your kids still need you to be a present father. If you're sitting there moping in the corner, how can you possibly show up for them? And secondarily, what sort of messaging does that send to them? Ultimately, the other thing you think about is, I'm drawn to this concept a lot, is whenever I feel sorry for myself and I get mopey and down in the dumps and, oh, life is so hard and woe is me, poor Brad. Like, what do I stand to gain from that, for one? And then for two, if I go in that mindset, I don't feel better after having done it. And then I wake up the next day to look at how much more work I have to do, how much more responsibility I have to make it up to my kids for how I showed up the prior day. It doesn't make things better. It just digs you in a bigger hole. So I guess the question for you, Dan, becomes, when you're in that mindset, right? It's easy to say at the surface level, oh yeah, just get your stuff done. But we all know that in practice, it's a whole lot harder than that. So what do you say to that?
It's a good question, because the whole time you're talking, I was thinking about, how I handle this stuff as an employer. So I've got, 13 direct employees right now, and they all come with their own baggage, good or bad. And as their direct supervisor, my job is to get the most out of them. And especially, I run a production floor, so it's very metric driven. How many widgets did you build today? How do we how do we do versus the estimated time that we were supposed to take to build all of these units, et cetera, et cetera. It's very, very metric driven, and how people show up mentally can have a big effect on that performance. As an employer, I'm cognizant of how my guys feel, how my employees feel, but I have to get to them to the point where, listen, I understand something's going on at home. Your kid's sick. Your wife's pissed at you. Whatever's going on that's got you upset, and we need to put that to the side. We can deal with that during breaks. You and I can talk. We're humans, and I value you as a person, but I also see this as you're here to do a job, and I've had that conversation so many times with people. So on a personal level, I have to hit a point in the pity party where I'm going, this is not serving me and serving anyone else. And I have to make a conscious decision to take whatever's bothering me, put it in a jar, put it away, get to work, and then deal with it later. And I think it's really important to point out here that I am not advocating not dealing with those problems, right? It's very easy to say, wrap it up in a jar, bury it deep, don't worry about it, just get to work. That sounds like a very rough, tough, masculine thing to say, and it's complete bullshit. You need to deal with whatever's going on. If your wife is sick, and I mean like some of the stuff that you've gone through in your past, right? That is going to affect you mentally. And you need to deal with that, however that is, whether it's talking to somebody, whether it's going to church, whatever gets you through that situation. And when you're in situations where you have a responsibility to perform, you've got to find a way to perform. Are you going to perform at 100% all the time? Probably not. But that's the goal, is to work as close to that 100% as you can.
If you're going through something difficult, it's okay to, you have to address those things. I 100% agree. At the same time, when you're going through something difficult, you can't just stop and look for a handout,
right,
or feel sorry for yourself. I know I shared this at some point a few episodes ago, but I remember there was a tremendous wake up point for me. I was very much the nice guy who put comments out there, and my whole social media was very much attention seeking. I wanted likes. I wanted validation. I wanted people to feel sorry for. I look back at so many of my Facebook posts from 2010 and I just cringe. They're absolutely terrible because I'm looking for handouts and sympathy. And I quickly learned that people have their own stuff, their own issues to deal with. It's not that they don't care, but that they have their own lives to deal with. And you're certainly not their primary motivation. It was a long, hard lesson. But I think what really woke me up to that was when my wife was going through cancer. I felt pretty emotionally trapped and I felt helpless. And I wanted everybody to feel sorry for me in my situation. And I reached out to a bunch of friends and said, hey, my wife has cancer. We're really having a hard time. Kind of in an attention-seeking way to get somebody to feel sorry for me and to reach out and connect. And I remember that so few people did. And I don't look at them and say, oh, they're bad friends or they're bad people. They had their own issues to deal with, and maybe they didn't know how to respond. But me looking for some sort of external motivation to pat me on the bum and tell me everything was going to be okay never came, ever. Mm-hmm. And I had to choose right then to say, you know what? I can either wait for this thing that I'm always hoping will come that will never come. If you're somebody who seeks external validation, you're never going to get that scratch itched. It's just not going to happen. You've got to do the work. It's kind of up to you to get through it. And it draws me to this quote. I know I've talked about this book a lot lately. I think I put up a reel or two about it, but On Yourself by Gary John Bishop. He says something in here that really sticks out. Life won't stop for your pauses and procrastinations. It won't stop for your confusion or fear. It will continue right along without you. If you stop and you're hoping for something to happen, somebody to come pick you up, if you're thinking, I'm just going to mail it in today, life's just going to keep going. Everybody around you, your employer, your family, they're not going to stop just for you. So how much more important is it for you to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, address what you've got going on in your life however you need to, and to continue pushing forward? Because nobody else is going to do it for you.
Yeah. It reminds me of something you were talking about the other day. You were talking about a call on your team, and one of your guys says something to the extent of, you've survived 100% of your bad days.
Yeah.
Or something along those lines, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I mean, I gotta be careful how I say this. There's nothing so bad in life that you won't get through it in one way or shape or form. People get sick. People unfortunately die. People get laid off. They lose their house, whatever it is. But you will get through it. You will survive it. It may not be the most comfortable thing in the world, and it may be a tough journey, but you'll get through it. The other thing to remember too is, right, we're talking about showing up and having integrity in your actions. If you're going through something really hard, your wife gets sick with cancer, your mom's dying, your house burnt down or whatever, maybe being at work that day isn't what you're supposed to be doing to begin with, right? So there's a prioritization effect to all of this that we're talking about. If it's so bad that somebody's in the hospital, maybe you're supposed to be with that person that day and call out of work that day, or you can't be present in your immediate family because you got to go home and deal with a sick parent or whatever it is. We're using kind of the same situations over and over again. But you understand what I'm saying is that you need to concentrate on the priorities in life. If the priority that day is to be at work because you've been absent a lot and you need to be at work to keep your job, to make sure that you have an income through this hard time, then you got to be at work and you got to be able to put everything else on the back burner, get the job done for those 8 hours, and then go back to dealing with the issue at hand. But if the issue at hand is so severe that it needs your immediate attention, then you don't need to be at work. And you can't serve both at the same time.
You have to have that self-awareness, regardless. Like, you have to understand where your priorities are. But along those lines, if you are somebody who is going through some sort of circumstance, right? I mean, not the emergency in the moment, house is burned down, you've got to figure all that stuff out. But let's just say you have a sick wife, you have a sick kid. You know what? Make an effort to keep getting out there and doing the stuff that you need to be doing. Keep showing up. Obviously we talked about my wife having cancer. We've talked about it several times. That was when I started getting my ass in the gym. I got up every damn day, rain, moon, or shine,
Mm-hmm.
and I got to the gym. I knew that at home I had a sick wife. We didn't know if she was going to live or die. We had a newborn son. It was a very scary, stressful, emotionally and mentally taxing time. It was pretty much all I could think about. But I knew that for myself and for my well-being, both mentally and physically, I had to get my ass to the gym every damn day. I had to do it. I had to go to work every damn day and pour everything I had into my job to show up and perform so that I could provide for them and take care of them. I knew that I had to do other things to get my mind right. I read, I journaled, I did those things because I knew that I needed to do those things for myself, that I still needed to show up. Rather than feel sorry for my situation, I went to work and it helped.
I was going to say the value in that too is it provides a distraction from the tough times.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sure that there were moments during that very hard process where you were grateful to be at work and busy and not just concentrating on the unknown what ifs.
Yeah.
You had a problem in front of you could solve it, and maybe things are percolating in the background and you're figuring out things subconsciously, but you're not dealing with it in an immediate sense. And it's a little, to be honest with you, probably a little bit of a stress relief for you.
Yeah.
Whether it was the gym or work or whatever.
That's where I fell in love with the gym, because it was one of the first things that I did that could take my mind off of the stress. Now, I will admit there were other things in my life that I still needed to correct at the time, and my wife will tell you the same thing. But it created routine. It got me mentally focused. So, of everything we're telling you guys today and everything that we're talking about, part of the reason that you need to continue to show up is for the benefits that it has for your mind. Whenever you're going through stuff, you're going to be tormented, you're going to be stressed, you're going to be anxious, you're going to be fearful. Those are all emotions that are very untenable. If you're filled with fear, it's not a very comfortable place to be. It kind of sucks. If you're filled with anger, it's an untenable place to be. It kind of sucks. So what can you do in your life to address and win the mental game that can set the table for everything else that you need to do? And that's why the power of showing up is so important, because that enables you to essentially release some of those emotions and focus on something else productive to keep you going.
So here's a question for you. You spend all this time during these hard situations showing up, right? You're being present for yourself. You're being present for your family. You're being present for everyone. At what point do you take care of you? And at what point do you address those hard things that are going on in your mind, and the what ifs and the oh my gods, this could potentially happen? Because you can't just let them fester.
No, that is a hard thing. And ultimately, we're always drawn back to this example of the airplane, and when they're doing all the flight safety measures before the flight, that you put the mask on yourself first and then you put it on your child. And so the whole concept of taking care of yourself first, it sounds counterintuitive, and trust me, it sounds selfish. You've got to take care of yourself first, because how can you reasonably show up for anybody else in your life if you're an anxious, stressed out mess? And frankly, you can't. Regardless of how easy it is to say, I need to put myself off. My wife is struggling. My mom is sick. My dad is having a hard time. Whatever that looks like. Yes, it sounds selfish. It sounds counterintuitive. But in order to show up for somebody else, you need to be your best self. Period. You can't execute if you're not your best self. How do you become your best self? By spending some time on yourself. And this does not mean, I'm going to take a day and I'm going to go do all this stuff for myself. That's selfish. But making time for yourself daily, with whatever that looks like, whether that's the gym, whether if you're somebody who enjoys writing or reading, or if you meditate, or if you just need to go outside the mountains or do whatever you need to do, spend that time on yourself daily first. You and I are both very big proponents of morning routines. My morning routine is the gym, because I know if I can get to the gym early, I can dedicate the rest of my day to everything else that I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
I look at it this way. Let's just say you've got a family member who's sick and in the hospital. What value do you serve showing up as a complete hot mess who isn't in control versus maybe spending a couple hours a day getting yourself in shape, whether that's going to the gym, meditating, journaling, doing some kind of morning routine, just something as simple as waking up a half an hour early before everyone else, having a cup of coffee and just watching the sunrise. Just something that helps center you, helps relax you, helps kind of get you right with your thoughts, and then going and showing up to be the helpful person in that bad situation. The value that you bring by taking care of yourself first is so immense compared to showing up as that hot mess who just brings more stress and more anxiety for everyone to the situation.
Yeah. Composure is crucial. It can oftentimes be a very underrated trait. There's a story I have. I wasn't sure if I wanted to share it today, but I had a very interesting example of the power of composure and making sure you get yourself right first.
Mm-hmm.
You okay if I share it?
Go for it.
Okay. So, oh gosh, Saturday night, just barely. I've shared before that I do some side hustle, DoorDash, Ubering to pay for, help support my wife so she doesn't have to work, to pay for some of my hobbies, to do some of these things. And I picked up a couple, and the husband was very inebriated, extremely inebriated. And I drive him home. They get out of my car. The husband kind of stutters out of my car, stands up, and immediately falls backwards. His head smacks my wheel hard, like freaking hard. Like all of his weight went into my wheel, like right on the rim. And his wife, wide-eyed and hysterical. It's like, oh my God. And I roll down my window and I'm like, is he okay? She said, I don't know. I get out, body's distorted and all contorted in crazy ways. His eyes are open. Doesn't look like he's breathing. I'm just like, oh crap. Is he dead? It was a situation in which was incredibly stressful. There's this woman who's hysterical. And I'll tell you what, I didn't have any emotional attachment to this guy, but at the same time, I know, damn, I don't want some guy to die as he's getting out of my car.
Yeah.
And I laugh now, but it was really scary at the moment. Right. But I'll tell you one thing. I had the mental wherewithal to be able to execute in that moment. Made sure he was taken care of, made sure he was in a place where he wasn't compromised. We're able to call the paramedics. We're able to check his vitals to make sure he was okay. He did end up being okay. He spent a couple minutes, not sure, but he ended up being fine, probably highly concussed. But the reason that I was able to execute in that situation and do something when it would be really easy to be hysterical. I'm not an EMT. I'm not somebody who's ever been around dead people or severely injured people. I work at a tech company in front of a computer and I don't get exposed to any of this stuff ever. But the fact of the matter is, because I've prepared myself mentally through working out, through meditating, through reading, through praying, journaling, I was able to execute in a moment where everybody around me was not in a position to do so. And that's the bigger picture reason for why we need to really focus on ourselves first. Yeah, I didn't have any skin in the game in knowing this guy. But that situation called for somebody to be composed, focused. When life is crashing around you, it demands, it's begging that you be focused and composed. So you've got to really work on yourself at getting there.
I did like the end that you left out about the guy.
Oh, yeah. When he came to
thanking you at the
end.
He
wanted a hug. I told him I didn't want to give him a hug, and he got really mad that I wouldn't give him a hug. It's like, I'm not giving you a hug, man. Sorry.
You make a very good point, though. It's the ability to stay composed and the ability to be able to lean on the work that we do on ourselves ahead of time as kind of preparation for the unknown is key. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, I'm sure your friends do this too, just being a parent, right? Yeah. Crazy things happen. The kids lock themselves in the bathroom. Somebody gets a deep cut. Somebody hurts themselves, whatever it is. And it's very easy to go crazy because your kid is in danger, but that doesn't bring any value to the situation. But by be able to stay calm and just address the situation and figure out how to work through it is paramount to just showing up as a man. And it's a testament to the work that we've done ourselves. I can remember a situation when my kids were little. And I'm talking just started walking kind of little. They were walking around downstairs in the den, and we we turned away from her for 1 minute. And the next thing I know, one of them's got themselves locked in the bathroom. Can't find the key to unlock the door. I got a screaming, toddler in the bathroom because they're scared out of their minds because they don't see mommy and daddy. And I had that door off the hinge in a matter of like a minute. But it was just very, my wife's freaking out, just very calmly kind of addressed the situation. And it was before I really got into a lot of what we're talking about, but I still feel like it was due to some of the stuff I had done in my life up to that point, between investing in myself in working out and doing hard things, and some of the leadership stuff that I had done as a kid and a young adult. Just leading up to that moment where I was able to kind of detach from the situation and provide value and show up, while on the deep inside, I'm freaking out because it's also my kid who's locked in the bathroom screaming her head off. But me being frantic brought nothing to the situation, much like you being frantic with that guy brought nothing to the situation.
Yeah.
It did not progress it forward in the right direction. And if you're able to control yourself in such a way where you can kind of take those emotions, put them to the side, show up in full integrity with yourself, and show up with full mental faculty, that's where we as men can really show up and provide value.
I'll tell you one thing, man. When shit gets real, where does everybody look? They look to the men.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what anybody says. I know that that's a controversial thing to say in the world in which we live, but people look to the men. That wife, when her husband, she wasn't sure what was going on, sure as hell was looking at me. When my kids are hurt, they're looking at dad. How's dad going to respond? How's dad going to react? How's dad going to protect me? If you're there freaking out or yelling or flailing your arms, what kind of message does that send to your kids? What does that tell your wife? What does that tell the people around you? Because I'll tell you what, every single one of them watches you, whether you like it or not. And the way that you respond in a situation is something that they're always going to remember. So your daughter at that time, she's not going to remember it now. I'll tell you one thing, your wife sure does.
Mm-hmm.
You showed up.
Yeah. I mean, there's, I'm sure you've got it too. There's tons of stories like that where the kids do something stupid. I could talk a lot about, we went through Hurricane Sandy down here when the kids were little. And there was a lot of situations like that where we just kind of had to figure out as you go. And, you're frantic. You're sitting there going, we don't have power. We've got a snowstorm rolling in. We got, the gas lines are 1.5 miles long with people getting in fights. But you just kind of slowly, methodically figure your way through it and don't get excited. And it helps everyone who's there.
Yeah. So. And don't beat yourself up if you're not perfect. Right? Like, we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to misstep along the way. We're not going to have our A game. It's going to happen. And we as men oftentimes hold ourselves to a very high standard. When we evaluate ourselves, we're very critical of ourselves. You might not have your A game. You might not be perfect in what you're doing. But
yeah, the key to it is finding ways to put yourself in stressful situations that are non-consequential and learning how to stay calm. And you can do that a lot of different ways. You can do that through physical activity. You can do that through, some solo adventures like backpacking and stuff like that. You put yourself in these situations, and while they may not relate action to action to something that occurs in the future, that feeling of being able to harness the calm under stress is what's going to help you perform in the future.
Comes back to why I always talk about jiu-jitsu and how it's one of the best things I've ever done for my mind. I'm in constant stress, getting smashed, smothered. But I'll tell you what, having gone through that, I'm much more mentally at peace. It's mm-hmm. wild. And I know you're the same way with whether it be mountain biking, backpacking, you do all that outdoor stuff. Hunting solo, when you're just putting yourself out there for the weekend. It's done a lot for you mentally. And I've seen it.
Yeah. There's thinking about it a little bit, right? There's acute situations like you, when you do jujitsu and you've got somebody who's trying to, put you in a weird spot or whatever. It's a very acute situation, and you have to be completely present in that moment, and seconds matter, or half a seconds matter, versus a situation like you were talking about with a solo backpacking trip or out hunting, something like that, where you have time usually to think through it a little bit more, but the consequences can be more dire, right? I could put myself in a situation where I mean, literally, there were situations this winter where if I made the wrong decision, I would be experiencing hypothermia and putting myself into real danger.
Yeah.
In jiu-jitsu, you're in a semi-controlled environment, and you're going to get pinned, you're going to get whatever, you're going to tap, but for the most part, you're not putting yourself into some kind of irreversible situation. So there's those acute situations like you've got versus a little bit longer, but more potentially severe situations. And putting yourself into all of those helps you get ready for the unknown in the future.
It comes back to, man, was it like the 5th episode we ever did where we talked about the adventure of doing scary stuff and how invigorating it is? Doing those things really does fortify your mind. Anything that you do where you challenge yourself and push yourself, it fortifies your mind and makes you more resilient. Cliff diving off a 60-foot cliff and you don't know how it's going to turn out. Scary as hell. I've never felt more alive. Things like that. Solo backpacking.
It's good to be scared. It's good to be scared. Bottom line, it's good to be scared. And if you can do it in a controlled environment where the consequences are relatively benign, that's going to be the best for you so that you're ready for those situations down the road where it's more real.
Cool, man. I think that's a pretty good,
all right, well,
that's a pretty good point to stop. No.
Yeah, that was a good one. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Good conversation. I want to thank all the guys for listening. We are coming up here on 1 year. I got to check the exact dates, but we are pretty close to having been putting out podcasts every week for a year. So that's something I know I'm really proud of. I hope the guys are appreciating it. We want to thank you guys all for listening, especially those of you who've been listening to all of the episodes. But for you new guys, hey, thanks for coming along for the ride. Make sure you're checking us out online. Check us out at the website, untamingmasculinity.com. You'll find show notes for this and all of our other episodes. You'll find links to our social media. We're really trying to grow our Instagram. And the other thing to do is make sure you check out YouTube. We're on YouTube. We've got every episode up there as well. So if you want to have it running in the background at work or whatever, you can listen to the podcast there as well. We're definitely trying to grow that viewership there. And finally, make sure you come back next week. We got great content coming up. We are looking at a few more guests to bring in, and we've got some pretty good topics lined up as well. So we appreciate you guys. Make sure you come back. Make sure you leave us ratings and reviews in the podcast player. That helps us spread the word. And until then, we look forward to talking to you next week. And we will leave you with just one question. What are you doing to untame your masculinity?